Hey guys, welcome to Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We just saw Spanish Fort beat Clay-Chalkville. An amazing game, two undefeated quarterbacks, 31-28 your final score. Tyler Johnson able to run the ball very well and win this game. Spanish Fort got out early. Clay just couldn't quite come back. Tyler Johnson, Ty Pickram both coming in undefeated. Tyler Johnson 34-0, Ty Pickram 29-0. Who could win? What did Spanish Fort do early to get out in front so by much and control this game?
Took advantage of a lot of mistakes, miscues by Clay-Chalkville. Clay was a very efficient offense for the last 2 years, and they did not perform well at all when it came to trying to get third downs. They shot themselves in the foot multiple times. It was absolutely brutal to watch sometimes. Such a great offense commit such atrocities against themselves. They really hurt themselves. I even saw, we were sitting in the booth, Jerry Hood about threw his headset down at one point. He was so upset, and that was in the first quarter. So you can imagine just what the night went like, even though it was a 3-point spread at the end of the game. It was a frustrating night for Clay trying to get out of the blocks. And what they did, we had a video preview that we were going to do originally and some technical difficulties, but in that preview I told you that the magic number for Spanish Fort to hit was 30. Now, the final score was 31-28. I'm not talking, though, about Spanish Fort's offensive points. I'm talking about the points they needed to hold Clay-Chalkville to at the ceiling. Remember, the last time Clay lost before this was in 2013 in the playoffs to Florence by a score of 37-30. So I set the bar at 30. I said, if you can hold Clay to 30, wow, how about that? Spanish Fort gets 31 around the mark. They hold Clay to 28. Such a great performance by the defense. The defense was incredible. That front line, the front seven of Spanish Fort, they run a 3-4 defense. They were absolutely masterful. They did the exact thing you needed to do against Clay-Chalkville. A lot of people, we saw different things you could do against Clay that were successful. Run against them, which Spanish Fort did. Throw well against them, which Spanish Fort did. But the key thing, the biggest thing had to be on defense. And what it is, it's not, you can't contain Ty Pickram. You can't corral Ty Pickram. We saw that in the second half. Eventually, he's going to break loose. What they did in the first half was a part of their game plan. And they had to execute, otherwise this was never going to work. They had to blow up the Clay-Chalkville offensive line, and they did that time after time after time. Pickram never had more than 2 seconds to make a decision, and by the time he wanted to take off, he had 2 or 3 white shirts around him ready to corral him and bring him down before he could get out of the pocket. And then sometimes when he would get out of the pocket, he'd still have Spanish Fort players around him because Clay's offensive line just couldn't keep control long enough for that offense to do what it needed to do. Not only that, though, but Ty Pickram needed to make some throws, and he did not. He was not as accurate as he needed to be. A lot of passes hit the shoulder. And then some passes he did make.
There were some drops.
There were drops. There were definitely drops, even including by a young man who will be here next year in T.J. Simmons. So it was all a bunch of mistakes on Clay-Chalkville, not taken away from what Spanish Fort did. Like I said, their defensive line earned this victory for Spanish Fort. They did exactly what they needed to do in the game plan. But in the end, a lot of it was also that Clay-Chalkville just did not execute and you saw the frustration on the sideline because of it. They tried to come back as often as possible, and the closest they kept getting within 3 points a couple of times, and they just couldn't finish the job in the end. Credit to Spanish Fort for hanging on. That was a huge second half because Clay was coming hard and heavy, and Spanish Fort put the right plays together at the right time to make this win possible.
Yeah, you talked about the offensive line. Look, I've been on the stage. I've played offensive line on the stage multiple times. It's hard. And everybody says defense wins championships or you have to have those star skill players. The offensive line wins championships. If you don't block, you're not going to win a championship. We saw tonight Spanish Fort just dominated that offensive line. They were able to make Pickram run around like crazy. He had to use his feet. And we saw it in the Homewood game. We saw it in the Hillcrest game. We saw it in a lot of games. Pickram's so dynamic a lot of times because he has to escape from people, and that makes him look that much better. And I think the offensive line, you're definitely right. That was a reason why Spanish Fort really controlled that line of scrimmage early.
Yeah, I think you and Mark May would have a good time sitting down and chatting sometime about the offensive line, about the big hog mollies. Yeah, Pickram, a lot. One of the things that we saw with Clay-Chalkville this year was that they had on third downs when it was third and long, they would utilize plays where Pickram would look at his first option. If his first option wasn't there, it was to immediately, the choice was to take off. Problem was in the first quarter, he didn't get a lot of room to take off. Eventually, he found those holes by the third and fourth quarter, But by then they got into a 17-point hole, and it was too big to climb out of. They didn't do enough to make that happen. Ty Pigram was a much different quarterback from first to second half. I think a lot of that speaks to the Spanish Fort game plan and Clay's ability to do well to adapt and change and fix mistakes. Spanish Fort just barely survived the onslaught that Clay started to bring on. But they, credit to Spanish Fort, they did stop. I think Clay had in the end 28 points or 21 in the second half. So that's still even a low number by Clay's standards at some times. So give Spanish Fort a lot of credit for being able to make enough stops when it mattered and making the most stops in the first half and getting that big lead ahead of time.
All right, so we had Spanish Fort win the championship here. Clay-Chalkville, now you're runner-up. Who's your top 5 overall now that we're done with the playoffs in 6A?
Number 5 is going to be my only other team out of the north besides Clay, and it's Austin. Gardendale's certainly a good candidate, but they, same region, got to the quarterfinals. Austin got to the semifinals. Remember, they beat Spain Park at a 7A, so they certainly earned their right to be in the top 5 of the entire
beat Bob
state.
Jones, too.
They did beat Bob Jones. So they beat 2 7A powers, 2 teams that were in the top, 2 or 3 in 7A. So, yeah, give Austin all the credit in the world. They deserve to be in the top 5 at number 5. The 4 and 3 are going to be 2 teams out of the South. 4 is going to be Ben Russell, who lost in the semifinals to Spanish Fort. Give them a lot of credit. They were really good in Region 3, second best team out of that region. That's why they're number 4, because number 3 is the other team that won that region. It's Opelika. I know they lost in the quarterfinals to Spanish Fort, but that's because it's
and bad matchups. A lot of those matchups happened in the quarterfinals. We had 2 really good 1 seeds from Region 1 and 3, or Region 5 and 7, 6 and 8, taking on each other.
Yeah, that was all circumstantial. That was all based on because of playoff seeding. Regions 1 and 3 had to meet up in the quarterfinals with their region winners. So Opelika got bounced a little sooner than they would have otherwise. So Opelika's number 3. They were really good. They were really good with Jake Bentley. I saw them in person against Chelsea. They were so good, especially on defense too. Just came up short against Spanish Fort, who won here tonight. 2, so obviously Clay-Chalkville,
right?
Because of the loss tonight. They were number 1 throughout the entire season, but in the end they couldn't close. And we saw how Jerry Hood was after the game. He was disgusted. He wants to finish. He loves to finish. He knows his team could have finished, and they just weren't able to, so they end up number 2, and obviously number 1 is your champions, Spanish Fort. The Toros did a masterful job this year, going unbeaten, bringing back Tyler Johnston, who I haven't talked enough about. Give him a lot of credit for the game he played. As you mentioned earlier in the video, he was dominant with his feet, and then later in the game with his arm, he made some spectacular throws when they were necessary, including the last touchdown to go up by 10 late. So Tyler Johnston, really good job, over 3,000 passing yards this year for this team. He's going to be a stud at UAB. They're lucky to have him to bring back the program with, because otherwise they could be in even much worse shape. That's a great quarterback to have bring your program back. So I look forward to seeing what he does in 2017 at UAB. Congratulations, Spanish Fort. They are number 1, no questions asked, unbeaten in 6A. As we called it, the main event, the only unbeaten matchup in this Super 7, and what a fun game it was. Tight as we expected. Not quite the way we thought it would go in terms of the fact Spanish Fort never trailed in this ball game.
No. All right. So now we're done with everything. I think they're about to kick us out. Everybody's gone from Bryant-Denny Stadium. So real quick, we talked about Tyler Johnston, how great he was. Coming into this game, I thought Ty Pigram was shoo-in for Mr. Football.
Yeah.
I thought he should have even won it last year over Kerryon Johnson. Now with this result, who do you have winning Mr. Football in the state of Alabama?
I like Tyler Johnston. He's a great quarterback. I'm not going to go as far as to put him as my Mr. Football. I think he's wonderful. He's certainly a candidate. Ty Pigram, with the season he had, it's one game here tonight. Doesn't take away from a season of what this kid did. He had 58 touchdowns coming into this game. He was unbelievable throughout the season. As you mentioned, I think he should have been Mr. Football last year, so it's overdue in a way. If you're going to give it to anybody besides Ty Pigram, I can't think of anybody better personally than Trey Nation, who he may not have the stats necessarily to back it up because of some injury issues that we talked about in the other video about 4A. But take away the stats, just watch the kid play. He is physically dominant and would dominate in any classification. Put him in 7A, 6A, wouldn't matter. He'd run through every defense. It would not surprise me at all. He had 5 touchdowns in their game today. yeah, if you're going to go with anybody but Ty Pigram, I'm going to go with Trey Nation out of Leeds. He certainly deserves that. Tyler Johnston is deserving. If he gets it, I'm not going to argue with it. It just wouldn't be in my two choices.
All right, so that's it from Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, home of the Alabama Crimson Tide. We saw some former future Tide players playing here this week. Of course, we just talked about T.J. Simmons. He'll be playing here on Saturday starting next year. That's it. 6A is done. Spanish Fort, your champion. Leeds won earlier today, and Elba beat Fife in a rematch. So we're done. Last words.
I can't believe it's over.
High school football season's done.
I don't want it to be done, John. I can't wait till next year. I'm really looking forward to what we see in 2016, especially with Clay-Chalkville, as we talked about with the rebuilding and Spanish Fort. I'm also looking to see what McGill-Tulane brings back next year because it is their first 7A title and see what they can do. Obviously, we want to see what Hoover can do coming
big question.
back.
Hoover, what are they going to do?
So, I mean, there's a lot to look forward to next year. Of course, a lot of the champions seeing what they can do with losing some big players, Leeds, what have you. The one team I'm really interested to see is Piedmont. Can they repeat as 3A champions with a tough Madison Academy team to deal with? There's no more Malik Miller. We'll see what Madison Academy brings to the table. But Piedmont was really good this year, so look forward to seeing what they can do out of 3A. It's a lot of rebuilding, and we'll also looking forward to seeing who will be the next teams to rise to the top. Personally, I'm going to go, I think the surprise team, if I'm going to pick anybody to make it this far, I'm going to go 6A. I'm going to give a real shocker. I'm going to go Gardendale. I think Gardendale.
They're right there. They had to compete with Clay-Chalkville this whole time. So everybody thinks, they're flying under the radar. They can't beat Clay-Chalkville. They're never going to make it. Clay now losing everybody.
I think Gardendale has – and look, Saraland would be an easy choice, but I think Saraland, they were here last year. Gardendale hasn't been in the state finals since, I believe, the 80s. So it's been quite a while for the Rockets. I'm going to give them some love because they are really good and just one hump from getting over into this spot, and that's really Clay-Chalkville. And I think Clay will be down next year. So I look for Gardendale to make headway, and I think they might arrive not here, obviously, it'll be in Auburn next year, but in the Super 7, in the AHSAA state championships for football. I think Gardendale would be the surprise team that we would see next year, but we'll see. It's a lot to look forward to in 2016.
All right, we're done here from the Super 7. Nick Saban's up there saying, hey, guys, wrap it up. We got to get out of here. Aaron Daniel, Jon Lunceford. Tune into the NFHS Network. We'll be live from the swimming state championships tomorrow down in Auburn at the James E. Martin Aquatic Center. And make sure to head to alpreps.com. Follow us at alpreps on Twitter, facebook.com/alpreps. We'll see you next football season, guys, for the 2016 Super 7.